All right, a weighted voting system is one in which some voters count more heavily towards the outcome of an election. Examples of this would be like stockholders. If somebody owns more stock in a company, then their vote would count more than somebody who doesn't own as much stock in the company. The Electoral College works this way because some states count more than other states. Some states get more votes because they have a larger population. The UN Security Council, European Union, these are all places where we're kind of thinking of somebody being more powerful in the sense of either having a larger population or owning more of a company, so their vote gets to count more. Our notation is we use these little square bracket things, and the number before the colon is called the quota, and that's how many votes it takes to win, or we say for like a resolution to be passed. With this, we're typically thinking about like yes or no votes. Like, should we pass this resolution, should we not? So kind of like yay or nay votes. And so the number before the colon is how many votes it would take for something to pass. And then after that is the weight of each voter. And we don't have to always, but usually those count down numerically, but they don't have to. That's just usually the way that we do it. So some examples here. The first one, that 51 would mean our quota is 51. And how many voters do we have?
6.
6 voters. We can just count how many numbers are after that quota.
It's like adding.
2 of the voters.
Does that word say before 50?
Quota is 51.
Okay.
2 of the voters, they count as, like, their single vote counts as kind of like 26 votes. So if those 2 voters would agree on something, would that be enough to pass it?
Yes.
Yeah, because 26 and 26 is 52. It takes 51 to pass it. So if the 2 of them agree on something, then that would go through and the other people's votes wouldn't even matter. The next one has a quota of 4. And then this actually, we still call it a weighting voted system, but each of these voters actually has equal weight. And how many voters are there? 6 voters. And so this one would take what we call a 2/3 majority to win, which is the way that a lot of political systems are run, is that something has to be passed by a 2/3 majority. So because 4, it takes 4 to win, and there's 6 people, then 4 over 6 is 2/3. So take a 2/3 majority for that one to win. What's the quota in the third one? 14. What seems strange about the votes?
One vote counts as more than what's required to win.
One person, their vote counts as 15 votes. We call that person a dictator. Because whatever that person thinks is going to be good enough to go. And if we add up all the other ones, we only get 13. So even if all of the other people agree that something shouldn't happen and the dictator says it should, oh well.
So does that have to be like more than or just enough?
Just enough to pass it.
Wait, what? Dictator?
Yep. That person who has more votes than it takes as a quota is called a dictator. Because their vote is the one that decides.
It's possible that there won't be a dictator.
Right, so in the other ones there weren't dictators because one single person couldn't control the vote. So a dictator is if one person holds enough power to pass a vote.
Would it be a dictatorship if the highest is 14, which is how many voters? Because you still couldn't like affect the vote, right? Instead of 15.
The other voters count up to 13. Is that what you're asking? As long as they can control the vote, they're called a dictator. If one single person can control the vote.
But does it have to be 1 over the quota?
No, the quota is how many votes it takes. So it has to be equal or more than the quota.
Oh, okay.
Equal to is still enough to pass it. What's the quota in the last one? 10. Okay. And then if we add those all up, what do we get? All of the votes together. 10. So this means needs full support. Or we could say each person has what we call veto power. Because every person could say, no, I don't want to, and there's no way that everybody else even working together could make it happen. So each person there has a veto power, where the vote needs full support. Questions on that?
You don't need to know like dictator rules.
Yeah. Yep. In the homework, it will ask you to explain, tell what the quota is, how many voters there are there any dictators, is there anyone with veto power? Yeah, those are things you should be able to find out.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to be in
Does it apply to
AP
this?
calculus to understand that?
Any set of voters who vote the same way is called a coalition, and the sum of their weights of those voters is called the weight of the coalition. If a coalition has a weight greater than or equal to the quota, then it would be called a winning coalition, because those people voting together would create a win. So the next one says a town has 2 large political parties, Republican and Democrat, and 1 small party, Independent. Membership on the town council is proportional to the size of the parties. We will assume that R has 9, D has 8, and I has only 3. Traditionally, each party votes as a single block. That means that they all agree straight down the party lines. Resolutions are passed by a simple majority, which means more than half. That's what simple majority means. List all possible coalitions and the weights and identify the winning coalitions. When we talk about how many coalitions we have, it will be 2 to the n minus 1 to make sure that you found them all. You can double check this, where n is the number of different voters. So in this problem, there are 3 different types of voters because there's the Republican, the Democrat, and the Independent. So for this problem, we would do 2 to the 3rd minus 1. 2 to the 3rd is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, minus 1 is 7. So that means there should be 7 different possible coalitions here. One coalition is the Republicans all by themselves, the Democrats, the Independents. So you will always have each individual just by themselves. Then you will have all of the possible groups of 2. So R and D, R and I, D and I. And then you would have all of the possible groups of 3, which would be R, D, and I. If you had 4 different voters, you would have more possibilities there, and then you would have the group of all 4 of them agreeing and voting the same. But you should have 2 to the n minus 1 total coalition, so you can double check that to make sure that you found them all. So these are all the different coalitions. It says list the coalitions and the weights and identify the winning coalitions. Okay, so we are told that R has 9, D has 8, and I has only 3. So the weight of R all by themselves would be 9, D would be 8, and I would be 3. It said it takes a simple majority to win. So to find out what a simple majority is, we need to know what more than half of the votes is. So how much would that be? So the total number of the votes is 9, 8, and 3. So that's 20
Over 10.
over 2. So it's going to take 10 for somebody to be able to win. Okay.
I don't get the 2n minus 1 thing.
That's just how many different coalitions you're going to have. So to make sure that you have them all. So we knew we had 3 different groups here, so 2 to the third minus 1. It's a way to double check and make sure that you've figured out what every possible coalition is. Because if you had started to list them out and you had only had like 5 there, you would know you're missing 2 different possible combinations.
So is 10 the quota?
10 is the quota.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't understand how you found the coalitions. Like,
Individual, so anybody just voting by themselves. Then if we would start to get some agreement, so then we look at all the different possible pairings, and then we would look at all the possible groups of 3, and that would just be it in this case. If there were 4s, we would have more options. So none of them individually are enough to pass it by themselves. But if R and D go together, how many votes do they have? 17, and that's enough to pass it. So they're a winning coalition. If R and I go together, how many do they have? 12, and that's enough to pass it. If D and I go together, how many do they have? 11, and that's enough to pass it. If they all go together, they have 20, and that would be enough to pass it.
how many does it tell us how many does it tell us how many we need to have to pass it?
It tells us that it has to be passed by a simple majority. So majority means more than half. So we would need more than 10 votes to pass it. So we add up their numbers and got 20, and we need more than that to pass it.
Oh, gotcha.
Or 50%
Okay, so-
really is enough, just 50%.
Why did you divide by 2?
Because we need 50% of the vote to pass it. So if the full vote is 20 votes, then it's going to take 50% of that, or 10 votes to pass it.
Okay.
A voter is critical if it is the case that if he or she leaves the winning coalition, the coalition would no longer be winning. So what we want to do is go back to this example now and look at who's critical. So if they would abandon the vote, would that group still win or not win? So with R and D, if R would leave, could D win it on their own?
No.
No. So R is critical. If D would leave, could R win it on their own?
No.
No. So they're both critical. The next one, neither R or I could carry it by themselves, and D and I can't carry it by themselves. For the last one, if R leaves, could D and I still win it by themselves?
Yes.
Yes, so R's not critical. If D leaves, could R and I still win it?
Yes.
Yep. If I leaves, could R and D win it?
Yes.
Yep, so nobody's critical there.
So how do we write that?
Yeah.
I just do it this way. I just like circle them in my coalitions,
Okay.
and that's fine. Okay. All right. The next one says, consider the weighting voting system 5, 3, 3, 2, 1. How many voters are there? 4 voters. What is the quota? 5. List all winning coalitions. So first I would want to list all possible coalitions and then decide if they would have enough to win it. So with 4 voters, we're going to have 2 to the 4th minus 1 possible coalitions. 2 to the 4th is 16, minus 1 is 15. So we're going to have 15 possible coalitions in this problem.
What is
So-
a coalition again?
A coalition is a group of voters.
Okay.
So our first is just each one by themselves. Then we need all possibilities of pairs. So when I think about pairs, I could have A and B, A and C, A and D. Or I could have pairs with B. So I could have B and A, but we already did that. So B and C, B and D.
And then
Or I could have pairs with C, so C and D, and then by the time you roll around to the last one, you're done.
Oopsie.
Because order doesn't matter, so AB is the same thing as BA. Then we need our groups of 3. So I could have AB and C, or AB and D. I could have a C and D.
A, B, C.
Then order doesn't matter, so we don't need to switch it around. So then I could have B, C, and D. Or, let's see, we already have B, A, and D, so that one's set to go. And then all 4 could go together. And then we want to make sure that's 15. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. We got them all. Okay. So that's why I do the 2 to the n minus 1 things to make sure that I have them all in the end. Okay? So we need everybody by themselves, every possible pairing, every possible tripling, and then, you know, I'm not going to make you do it for more than 4, but you would need every possible quadrupling, every possible pentupling, or whatever. I don't think I'm going to make you do it for more than 4. So.
There's 5 and number 6.
Oh, is there on the homework? Okay, so then you have to do it for number 5. To decide if they're winning, we have to see if their votes are enough to pass it. So we have them, I would consider them in order as like A gets 3, B is 2, C is 2, and D is 1. So A alone can't pass it. Actually, none of them alone can pass it. So singles aren't going to happen. None of those are winning. A and B, does that do it?
Yes.
A and C?
No.
A and
Yes.
C is 5. So that's good enough. A and D.
No.
That's only 4, so that's not good enough. B and C?
No.
It's 4. B and D? 3. C and D? 3. Or B and D was 3. A, B, and C.
Yes.
A, B, and D.
Yes.
A, C, and D.
Yes.
B, C, and D.
Yes.
And then all 4 of them agreeing on something would pass it as well. So those are all of our winning coalitions. We could then go through there and decide who's critical in those. When we think about who's critical, we think about if they dropped out, would it still be enough? So it didn't ask us to do this, but when we think about critical, I would say if just A and B are in there and one of them drops out, would it still happen? And it wouldn't. So they're both critical. A and C are both critical to that one. Then as we go to A, B, and C, if A drops out, can B and C do it? No. So A is critical to that. Because if A drops out, B and C don't have enough weight to carry it on their own. So A is critical to that. B or C could drop out though, and they would still be able to carry it. A, B, and D, if B and D are alone, they don't have enough to carry it. So A is critical there.
You have 2 critical?
Yes. In the other ones, I didn't circle them, but both of them are critical to it. A, C, and D wouldn't have enough to carry it by themselves. So A is critical there. But A with either of the other ones would be enough to do it. Ooh, and this one, let's see, A, B, D. If B drops out, then A and D can't do it alone. So B was critical there. And if D drops out, A and B would be fine. B, C, and D, if B dropped out, C and D couldn't handle it on their own. If C dropped out, B and D couldn't handle it. If D dropped out, they couldn't handle it either.
So they're all critical.
In the last one, we just look at one single person dropping out, and any of them would be fine. So there's nobody critical in the group of 4. This problem didn't ask you to come up with critical, but that's how we do it. Look at if that single person drops out, do the rest of them still have enough to carry it or not? Knowing who's critical will be really important for the next lesson. It'll be a big idea in the next lesson.
Just say it.
How do you say it?
All right, so then
Seal.
our last example, suppose the company owns respectively 500 shares, 375, 225, 400 shares. There are a total of 1,500 votes, and the quota is 751, which is just a majority, more than the half. Write the weighting voted notation. So our notation uses the square brackets. Quota comes first, and then we give their votes. 500, 375, 225, 400 for A, B, C, D. Determine the winning coalitions and the critical voters. So this has 4. It's going to be the same as the last one. Alright, so it's going to be exactly the same coalitions as the last time, which is one of the nice things about using letters. Once you kind of figure it out once, then you can just kind of keep reusing it that way.
So it's just 15.
So it's 15, yeah, because there were 4 of them. So 2 to the 4th minus 1 is 15. So in your homework, I guess if there's a group of 5, it'd be 2 to the 5th minus 1, which will be 31 coalitions then.
31?
2 to the 5th is 32, and 32 minus 1, so there should be 31 coalitions in there.
I don't know what I missed. I don't know if it's worth it.
So then we decide if they have enough to win. They need 751 to win, so nobody can win it alone. So then we start looking at pairs. A and B, they have enough to win it together. A and C would be 725. That doesn't cut it. A and D would be 900. They can do it. B and C would be 600. That's not enough. B and D would be 775. That does it. C and D would be 625. That's not enough. A, B, and C would be enough.
Well, this would.
A, B, and D would be enough. A, C, and D would be enough. B, C, and D would be enough. And then if 3 alone can do it, then all 4 working together can certainly do it. To decide who's critical, we look at if somebody drops out, can the other person hold it by themselves? Since no person can hold it singly, everybody's going to be critical in the pairs because no person has enough to hold it by themselves. Now I know that B and C can't do it alone because I already said that in the other column. That means A is critical in that first group because if they drop out, B and C, we already said they don't have enough to do it on their own. If B drops out, A and C don't have enough to do it on their own. If C drops out though, A and B can handle it. If A drops out, B and D can handle it. If B drops out, A and D can handle it. If D drops out, A and B can handle it. So nobody is critical in that second group. In the third group, if A drops out, C and D can't handle it. So A is critical. A and D can handle it, so C is not critical. A and C cannot handle it, so D is critical. B and C cannot do it alone, so D is critical. C and D cannot do it alone, so B is critical. B and D can do it, so C is not critical. In the last group, nobody would be critical because any group of 3 would still be able to hold it. Try again. You will find, and this will be important for tomorrow, that
Hey everybody! We just wanted to remind you that tomorrow is the middle school production of Rescuing Dreamwood.
The times are at 3 and 7. Admission is $5 per person.
You won't want to miss it.
Hope to see you all there.
Bye!
They wrote that out.
You will find that voters that have higher power are going to be critical more often, and that will be important in our next lesson when we actually try to assign to them how much power do they really have.
Alright, Neil,